All right, so now we're finally in geometry, and the first thing I'm going to teach you is going to be on the first quiz, and it's going to be on the first on the first test. So here it is. This thing is called undefined terms. It means they don't have a definition. Now we're going to talk about it, and we're going to describe them, but they don't have an official definition. And there's 3 of them. There's 3 undefined terms. And the first question on the quiz from, I don't know what it covers up to, the first 2 or 3 sections, I'm going to give you a quiz after we're done that. And the very first question, I'm telling you what the question is right now, and I'm giving you the answer. Okay, I'm going to ask you to list the 3 undefined terms. Okay, and here they are. The first one is point. The second one is line. And the third one is plane. We're going to talk about all 3 of those. We're going to talk about how to draw them, how to label them, and all that kind of stuff. They don't really have definitions, so I'm not going to ask you what the definition is because they're what kind of terms? They're what? Undefined terms. So they don't really have a definition, but we can talk about them. We can explain what they are, but they don't have like an official definition. But that's going to be your first question. You got to get all 3 of them. It's not going to be questions 1, 2, and 3. It's only going to be question 1. But you just list point, line, plane. That's it. As simple as that. I don't care what order they're in. All right. But just write down point, line, and plane. That's your 3 undefined terms. There you go. You got the first question on the first quiz that we're going to take in geometry. All right. That was nice of me, wasn't it? Yeah. So put it in your notes so that you know. Let's talk about a point. A point, now again, this is not a definition, so don't even write it down. But it's a dot or it's a location that has no length, no width, or no thickness. All right? So if I describe a point, notice what I said. I'm describing a point. I'm not defining a point. I put a little dot. Now, if I zoomed up to this dot, you'll see that it does have some width, doesn't it? Right? If I took a ruler out, I can measure how far it is from here to here. I can measure the height of it. All right? Now, if I wrote this in pen or pencil on a piece of paper, it would have some thickness. It would come off the paper just a little bit. Since this is digital, it doesn't really do that. But it doesn't have any thickness, but this dot right here, it does have some width. But the dot itself is not the point. The point is where it describes, or what it describes. It describes just one place in space. All right, that's all it does. It just describes one place in space. I don't really care that you know that as far as like being able to write that down or anything. Here's the one thing I will make sure you need to know. All right, so if I put a point, we got to label that point. That's what we're going to do with all 3 of these things. With point, line, and plane, we're going to label them. And we always, this is what's important right here. We always label a point with a capital letter. All right? It has to be a capital letter or uppercase, however you want to describe it. Same thing, right? So if I have a point, we always name it with a capital letter. I could have another point right here, and we'll call this point B. So this is point A, this is point B. They're 2 different points, right? They have 2 different names. This is point A, this is point B. All right? I could call this point anything as long as it's a capital letter, one single capital letter. Give me a name for this point right here. Z? All right, Z. I always put a little bar through the Z just to make sure it looks like a Z and not a 2. So these would be all points. This is point A, point B, point Z. All right? Pretty easy. Now, if I said something about, I don't know how I could, if I talked about a point, if I wanted to write a point, I don't write the word point A. I don't even do this. I don't even put a point A. If I just was going to name this point, I would say, out of my words, like out of my mouth, I would say point A. But if I was to write it down, I would just put a capital A. If all you saw was just a capital A and nothing else, what would that mean it's indicating? That is point A, exactly. All right. If I had a Q just sitting there by itself, what does that mean that is? Point Q. All right. So if I was to describe, and we're going to talk about this when we do line and plane, but if I wanted to describe a certain point, I would say, oh, that's point Q. I would not put a little dot and say, oh, point Q or point A. You with me? So when I'm labeling them, I just use the capital letter. It's as simple as that. Pretty easy. Let's go to line. Let's draw a line, and I'll just slant it just so it kind of fits. It could be any slant or anything. But a line's got to be a straight set of points. So if I have a straight set of points that keeps on going forever and ever and ever, okay, infinitely, that's the word we use, then that's a line. Why do you think I put the arrows on that? Because it keeps going. Right, the arrows means it keeps on going. If all I did was this, is that a line right there? It's not. It would be a line segment. We're going to talk about that in another lesson, probably the next lesson, right? But this is different than a line. This one starts and stops. This one keeps what? Keeps going in both directions. It keeps going, all right? Now, let's talk about how to name the line, all right? If I was going to name the line, there's a couple ways we can do it. Do this and put a different color. Let's say, now how many points are on that line right there? 2 on this line right here? 100? Somebody say 100? Somebody say 3? Remember, the line keeps doing what? Going. So how many points are there? There's an infinite number of points. And the point doesn't have any size either. Remember that? It doesn't have any size. So really, think about this. I didn't talk about this in the other class, but since you brought up line segment, how many points, watch, here's a point on the end, here's another point on the end. How many points are on that line segment? 10? Where'd you get 10 from? I heard 2. I heard 2. I can understand 2 because you got a point here and a point here. But a line and a line segment is made up of a whole bunch of points, right? How many? A whole bunch. It's not very specific, is it? So even between here and here, how many points are there? Infinite number of points, exactly right. There's an infinite number of points because the point doesn't have any width. It's not like I can put so many points on there that they're right up against each other and I can't fit another one in. I can always fit another point in. You with me on that? Okay. For instance, I could find the halfway point, couldn't I? And we'll talk about that in another lesson. It's called the midpoint. But I could go half of this. Then I could go half of this. Then I could go half of this. Then I could go half of this. How many times could I keep going a half? An infinite number of times, okay? Now, the way I'm marking it on the paper, I'll get to a point where I can't fit any more in, right? Because of the thickness of my pencil or pen or in this digital pen, all right? But that doesn't mean that you can't always take half of something. I mean, is there a number so small that I can't take half of it? No. I can always take a half of any number, as small as you can possibly think. I can always take half of it, or I could always get a little smaller. Does that make sense? So technically, this is kind of weird, but technically, there's just as many points on this line segment as there is on this line that keeps on going forever. All right? You're like, well, how's that possible? Because that line segment's only this long. A line keeps going forever. How could there be the same number of points? Because there's an infinite number of points on each of them, right? Is there a bigger infinite and a smaller infinite? No. Infinite is what? Infinite. That's right. It just keeps on going forever and ever. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of interesting to think about. A lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about stuff like that. I don't. I just talk about it every once in a while when I'm doing this. All right, but what we're going to do here, there's an infinite number of points, but how many points are labeled on that line? There's no points that are labeled, so let's label a few. Well, actually 2. I'm going to label this point right here, and I'm going to label this point right here. I'll call this, I don't know, give me a couple points, letters. I always use A and B all the time. Let's get more creative. What is it? X and what else? Q. Q? All right. So we got points X and Q. In order to make a line, what's the minimum number of points that we need in order to make a line? 2. All I need is 2. If I got 2 points, I could connect them, and I got a line. Would you agree? That's the minimum. What if I just had 1 point? Could I make one particular line out of that? Again, I didn't do this in the other class, but I just thought about it. Somebody did ask something. So look, there's 1 point. But look, I'm not going to put the arrows just because it takes too much time. But I got a line that goes through that point. Is that the only line that goes through that point, though? No. I got to have a line going this way. I could have a line going this way. I could have a line, going this way. Would you agree with that? So I can't just have 1 point to make a line. How many do I need to make one particular line? I need 2 points. Could I draw a line any other way through those 2 points and get a different line? Nope, because look, if I drew a line like this, would it go through that point? No. If I drew a line like this, would it go through point X? No, it wouldn't. So there's only one line that connects those 2 points right there. Everybody understand that? Yeah, it's not too hard. Here's what I'm really concerned about. Okay, that was just kind of theoretical thinking and stuff like that. Now this is practical. I want to label and I want to be able to name that particular line. Josh, get your head up. Please pay attention, okay? If you don't get this, you're going to miss a lot of stuff all throughout the rest of the book, right? This is really important that you know how to label points, label lines, and label planes, and that's what we're doing today. So if I was to label this line right here, here's what I would do. You would pick the 2 points on the line, so X and Q, and it doesn't matter what order you put them in, okay? I could go XQ, or I could go what? QX. But here's the symbol, all right? It's very important that you see this. Everybody watching, paying attention, writing it down. Here's the symbol. You put a little line with 2 arrows on the ends. That means that right there tells you that it's a what? That it's a line. Okay, that's the symbol. You're not going to do this. You're not going to put the word line and then go XQ. That is not how we label it. We label it with XQ with a little line symbol over top of it. That saves us from writing the word line. You okay with that? Yeah, it's not too hard. And again, I mean, this is no lie. I'm not joking. This is going to be used throughout the whole entire course. You're going to have to be able to label lines. All right? It's very, very important. Yes? No, you don't use numbers. Remember, these are capital what? I just put capital, but I should put capital what? Letters. Okay? So points are always capital letters, not numbers. All right? Okay, they're only capital letters. What if I did this? What if I stuck another point on there? Call it point T for Thoreau. What if I wanted to name that line again? Now, I got 3 points on there. Do I use all 3 points and call it XTQ? No. How many points do I use? I only use 2. And it doesn't matter which 2 you use. They got to be on the line, though. All right? So the points have to be on the line, but I can use any combination of 2 of those points. All right? So we got a bunch of things that we could call it then. We could call it what we did earlier, XQ. Agreed? We could go the other way and call it what? QX. But now, sticking that other point in there, I could call it something else. What else could I call it? XT. Good. I could call it XT. I could go backwards and call it what? TX. And then there's another thing I could call it. What else? Yeah. TQ. And then if I want to go the other way, I could call it QT. So look, all those different ways I could name that line. All right? And it doesn't matter which one you pick. Now, with that said, most of the time, I would probably pick the ones that are on the outside. Okay? So if it was me and I wanted to name that line, I would probably name it that right there. But does that mean it's any better or worse than the other ones? No, it's the same thing. But again, just to be consistent, right, just so that it makes it a little bit easier, I usually pick the ones that are on the ends, and I usually go from left to right if it does go from left to right. But it doesn't matter, though. It doesn't matter. All right? That's just my preference, though, that one right there. Everybody with me? All right. What if I put another point? out here. Could I call that line XR? No, because this line right here, this white line right here, R is not on that point, is it? Or it's not on that line, I'm sorry. So point R is not on that line, so I can't call that XR. Now, does that make another line though? Yeah, it makes another line, but it goes this way. It's a completely different line. Everybody got it? Yeah, not too bad. All right. It's not difficult, but it is something we're going to use over and over and over and over and over again. All right, so make sure you know how to label a line. Here's one more way to label a line, and then we'll get to plane. I'll tell you what, let me push this down. Let's go to white, and then we'll label it in red or something. All right, let's say we have a line going this way, and I'm going to put arrows on the ends like that. Here's another way I can name this line. What if I don't have any points? What if I don't know any points on that line? Now, I know I got an infinite number of points, all right, but I don't know any of the names, okay? Nothing's labeled. Here's another way we can name this line. We can name it with a lowercase letter, one single lowercase letter, all right? A lot of times they use L to begin this. Why do you think they use L? Because it's a line, right? Okay, but you could use any letter, okay? I think in my other class I used A or B or something like that, okay? But we could call this line L. Now, we don't put the line symbol. If I just use a lowercase, that's a lowercase L. If I use a lowercase letter, okay, I don't put the little line symbol like this over top of it. If you had it like this, and that's the only thing they told you, and you needed to write it down, what would you write? You would write line L. So that's how you would write that one. Make sense? Every once in a while, they'll do that. They'll give you the line with just a letter, all right? And we could just name it just with that single letter. But most of the time, I guess, I would say most of the time, they put points on the line and you use the points that are on the line. Every once in a while, they'll do this. They'll put like a little, let's go lowercase, a little a. So I could call this any of these, or I also could call it what? Line A, right? All right, line little a, lowercase a. All right, enough of that. Let's move on to plane, and that should take us to the end. Here's how they usually draw a plane. Now, don't draw a rectangle, because I'm going to change that just a little bit. If I go to this, go to this, go to this. All right. See how it's slanted? Most of the time you see it in the book. If you see a slanted, like four-sided figure, that's usually how they describe a plane, okay? That's usually a plane. There will be times on the homework and on a quiz and test where I say, draw plane whatever with a line that's on the plane and a point that's on the plane. So you might have to draw some of these. It's not that difficult to draw. You don't have to be any kind of artist. I'm definitely not an artist, right? But you could draw something like this. Even in my honors class, I had kids drawing a plane like that when I specifically told them to draw it so it's slanted, all right? Would this be okay? Yeah, I would be fine with that, I guess. But most of the time you see in the books and worksheets and everywhere else, they usually draw it slanted like this, okay? All right. Now, plane is basically made up of a whole bunch of different lines. Well, lines keep going forever and ever, so what do you think this plane does? It keeps going forever and ever. Now, we don't have like arrows or anything to show that it keeps on going forever and ever, and it looks like it stops like right here. There's planes in this room, aren't there? Look at the ceiling. It's a flat surface, right? Now, the thing is, though, that ceiling, it doesn't keep on going forever and ever, does it? It stops right there, all right? It'd be crazy, wouldn't it, for our ceiling to keep on going forever? But what it does, it represents a plane. This wall right here represents a plane. The floor represents a plane. Anything with a flat surface represents a plane. If I held up a sheet of paper, if I could keep it completely flat, that would represent a plane. But does the plane stop right here? Does the plane of the ceiling stop right there? Well, the ceiling stops, but it represents a plane that keeps on doing what? Keeps on going forever and ever and ever. So technically this piece of paper right here does stop right here, but it represents a flat surface in this space that keeps on going forever and ever and ever. So a plane keeps on going and it doesn't stop. But we can't really draw that on a piece of paper or on this computer program. We can't really draw it. So you just have to understand that it looks like it stops here and here and here and here, but it doesn't. It just keeps on going forever and ever. Everybody with me on that? Now, we need to name the plane. We got to name the plane. Very similar to what we did on the second way that we named the line. We use a lowercase letter to represent a plane. A lowercase letter. There's actually two ways, but the first way is a lowercase letter. And you'll see this quite a bit. And you can put it in any corner. Don't put it right in the middle. Don't put, I'll use A again. Don't put it right in the middle. That's not what we do. We put it either up in one of the corners or down in one of the bottom corners. And again, it does not matter which corner you put it in. Just put it in one of the corners. Okay? So that's one way to name a plane. And there's no like symbol. You know, we had the symbol for a line. There's no symbol for a plane. So guess what we're going to do? We're just going to call this plane what? A. And it must be lowercase. Don't use a capital letter. And again, even in my honors geometry, I had kids putting capital letters here. Now, there is a way to put capital letters if you have 3 or more points labeled on that plane. So I'll just make this easy. A, B, and C. So I got point A, point B, point C. So if I have 3 letters, not 2, okay, not 1, but if I have 3, then I can name this plane. What do you think we're going to call it? Yeah, plane A, B, C. So there's 2 different ways to name it. If they just have a little lowercase letter in the corner, just use that. Okay, if you have a whole bunch of points on here, then you can use 3 of those points. Doesn't matter what order we put those points in. Doesn't make any difference. I could call it ABC, I could call it CBA, I could call it ACB, I could go CAB, whatever other combinations there are to that. Okay, it does not matter. But you use 3. Don't use 4. What if they have a point right there and it's D? Am I going to call it ABCD? No. Pick any what? 3 points. Okay, pick 3 of those points. And again, it does not matter which 3 you pick. All right? And then that's what you would name it. You would name it that plane. There you go. That's your first intro to geometry. And a lot of the intro to these chapters is going to be stuff like this. We're going to learn words, pictures, how to label stuff. It's a lot of vocabulary, and a lot of labeling, how to label certain things, write certain things, a lot of shorthand kind of stuff, right? Instead of writing the word line, we put the line symbol over top of it. There's a lot of that kind of stuff, all right? Now, we only got less than halfway through that section. So when we come back on Wednesday, we'll finish that up. I gave you a lesson plan, and it says on Wednesday, or it says we have homework tonight, but there is no homework tonight, okay? We'll put Monday on Wednesday and just push everything back a day. It is recorded, yes.